Welcome to the 24th episode of Arbiter of Worlds. If you're a returning subscriber, thanks for supporting the channel. If you're new to the channel, hello. Here at Arbiter of Worlds, we study the art and science of running and creating tabletop role-playing games. Today we're going to discuss how to develop RPG smash-ups that combine your favorite gaming systems together into something maybe not better, but at least unique. The concept of the smash-up, also known as the mashup, the blend, the cut-up, the crossover, or the power mix, first appeared in the music industry, where it referred to a song or composition created when a producer blended a pair or more of previously existing songs, generally by combining the vocal tracks from one song with the instrumental track of another. Now, smash-ups have been around a long time, but they became a 21st century cultural phenomenon with 2004's Grey album, which was a smash-up by Danger Mouse of Jay-Z's Black album and the Beatles' White album, and it all blew up from there, and nowadays they're practically high art. Of course, smash-ups are not confined to music. You have video game smash-ups, often called mods, and you have tabletop RPG smash-ups. And smashing up RPGs could be defined as replacing major rule components with components from different games, or taking two games in your collection and mixing them together. However you define it, it's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite pastimes as a game master, blending systems and settings together to create something unique. It's a way to set your campaign apart from everything else out there, and I basically recommend every game master should delve into the art of the smash-up. Just as modding video games is a great way to learn about video game development, smashing up RPGs is a great way to learn about RPG design. And learning about RPG design will make you a better game master because you'll know how to make judgments that work with the rules. Now, if you spend much time on gamer forums, you're going to see some really humorous smash-ups. My personal favorite of all time is the smash-up of the esoteric fantasy games Empire of the Petal Throne and Sky Realms of Jarun, which together create Sky Realms of Tecumel, a world so weird that no one goes there at all. Now, obviously the writers are doing that one just for giggles, but the key to any smash-up is always to notice how two systems or settings might fit together, some common ground. I call this finding the hook. And it's the first step in a three-part process. So part one, the hook. You notice a rule mechanic or a setting element from one game that somehow fits into the framework of the rules or setting of the other game. Two, the blend. So this is when you adapt the rule mechanic or the setting element from the first game into the second game. And this can be as simple as one mechanic, or it can be as simple as dozens of mechanics to change it over to an entirely new setting. Step three, the double check. And this is when you review adjacent rules or setting elements to make sure that the smashed up game that you've created is still coherent. I know that sounds really abstract, but it's easiest to explain in practice. So let's start smashing. Smash up number one, Car Wars meets Classic Traveler. Steve Jackson's Car Wars was a widely played simulation of automobile combat in a semi-post-apocalyptic future. Car Wars is mostly about car combat, but it has the skeletons of a role-play system. Characters are rated with skills like Gunner and Mechanic with ratings from 0 to +5. Task resolution can be resolved with a roll of 2d6 plus the skill level to meet a difficulty number. So for instance, to hit with a machine gun requires a roll of 7 or greater, with the character's gunner skill level added to the total of the dice. Now, as it happens, this skill system and this task resolution system are precisely mirrored in Game Designers Workshop's Classic Traveler, which is the influential science fiction RPG from the 70s. In Classic Traveler, characters are rated with skills like Gunner and Mechanic, with ratings from 0 to +5, and the task resolution is resolved with a roll of 2d6 plus the skill level versus a difficulty number set by the weapon. This is our hook. We've noticed that the core mechanics of the two systems are identical. Now, what makes this interesting is that Car Wars offers virtually no character development around this system, while Classic Traveler is famous for its character generation system, in which your characters go through a career path, they can enter the military, they can gain promotions and commendations, they can earn rewards such as weapons, armor, starships, they can even die in the line of duty. So the obvious mashup then would be to adapt this Classic Traveler career path to to Car Wars. So we might replace Marines with auto-duelists, Scouts with Outriders. Rewards like spaceships could become automobiles. That would be our blend, adapting the character generation system from Traveler into Car Wars. We will cleverly call our new game Driver. Now, once the Driver blend is written, the double check would be to assess what this does to all the adjacent rules. And here we note that Classic Traveler produces characters with an average of 4 to 6 skills at +1, while Car Wars starts characters with 3 skills at +0. So our Smash Up is going to create characters that are more competent than starting Car Wars characters. And so we need to make a note that to challenge the characters created using our driver system, we need to make sure to raise the difficulty level of roles and make sure that major NPCs are rolled up using a similar system. Now, one time there actually were some hardcore Car Wars fans working on this particular Smash Up, but they've long since disappeared from the net. Still, this is one that I've wanted to design for a long, long time, and so if I ever tackle a car game, it might be something like Driver. All right, let's consider a second example. Cyberpunk meets Runequest. So we're going to turn to Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk 2020. This is an amazing game. It defined the cyberpunk genre in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. And one of its most widely imitated mechanics is the concept of cyberpsychosis and humanity loss. The idea is that each character in Cyberpunk has an empathy attribute, which controls persuasion, seduction, diplomacy, and other social skills, similar to D&D's charisma score. But as your character gets upgraded with cybernetics like boosted reflexes or grafted muscles, your character incurs humanity loss, which permanently lowers empathy. So the more cybered up a character gets, the less able he is to interact with fellow humans. And characters whose empathy drops to 0 become cyber psychos and generally get killed by kind of this elite Blade Runner type cops. So while empathy is not directly useful to combat or action-oriented characters, it serves as a cap on how upgraded such a character can become through cybernetics. Now, if you've played a lot of Cyberpunk, it is impossible to read the rules to Chaosium's Runequest without comparing that game's power mechanic to Cyberpunk's empathy mechanic. In Runequest, each character has a power attribute that measures their psychic strength. Characters need power to cast spells, but they also can permanently sacrifice points of power to bind demons, create magic items. This is our hook, the similarity of sacrificing empathy to get cybernetics and sacrificing power in Runequest. What if we had magical cybernetics that drain power? So to blend them together, we sketch out the form of these cybernetics. And because we're inspired by the edgy aesthetic of Cyberpunk, maybe we make them things like flesh runes, which are tattooed glyphs on the flesh, and soul jewelry, which is like magical rings and amulets that have to be pierced through the flesh to have permanent effect. And then like cybernetics, the flesh runes and the soul jewelry could augment a character's strength, so the equivalent of grafted muscles. They could augment speed, like boosted reflexes. They could provide natural armor, like subdermal armor, ability to see in the dark, like night vision optics, on and on. And then each of these upgrades would require a permanent sacrifice of power based on the benefit gained. And if a character's power drops to 0, then he becomes a soulless zombie, the equivalent of a cyber psycho. Pretty cool. So now we're going to double check. And we note that a character's current power is the basis for his magic resistance, meaning characters which have cybernetics would be very susceptible to all forms of magic. But these are supposed to be magic cybernetics, so that doesn't make sense. It's kind of punitive. So maybe we would adjust the magic resistance rules, right? Maybe your magic resistance is based on the character's power plus the value of the power imbued in the cybernetics. So we can call this game Runepunk. And unlike Driver, a version of Runepunk actually does exist. I ran it as a campaign in 2008. It was my very first game I ever set in the Arn Empire setting before ACKS even existed. Interestingly enough, about a decade later, Artalsorian Games itself released a game which is nearly a perfect implementation of a Runepunk mashup, but in the other direction. And it's called The Witcher RPG, and it uses the Cyberpunk 2020 rules set in the world of the Witcher novels, and it has a sacrificial mechanic to augment your character. So hopefully these two examples have demonstrated what smashing up is all about. Once you know to start looking for these smash up hooks, your collection of RPGs transforms from games you probably won't ever play to systems for smashing. So I hope you start smashing. Now, at this point, some of you watchers might be thinking, Arbiter, aren't you about to release an amazing new tabletop role-playing game representing the culmination of over a decade of work towards creating the broadest, deepest fantasy RPG in the market? Why would you encourage your watchers to smash up other people's game systems when you're going to soon be launching a Kickstarter for your amazing new game system called Adventure Conqueror King System 2? Well, that's a great question, watcher. Thank you for asking. The reason is that my game, ACKS II, is specifically designed to make smash-ups easy. It's got a modular rule system, unless you customize the game in tons of ways, such as custom class creation, custom race creation, custom magic creation, custom spell creation, custom monster creation. And so if I persuade some of you watchers to start doing smash-ups, I'm confident you'll gravitate towards ACKS II because of what it offers. And also because I'm just generally overconfident, which gets me into lots of trouble. All right, I'm going to end this video with some other systems I think are ripe for a smash-up. Number 1, Ascendant and Warhammer Fantasy. Number 2, Barbarians of Lemuria and Star Wars D6. And number 3, Shadowrun and Vampire the Masquerade. But before you start smashing those systems, please be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons and add a smashingly good comment. I'll see you next week.